Hi everyone, and welcome back. Much shorter time frame than I expected to be after only going and doing a video yesterday, I think it was. It appears that these things are becoming quite popular. and really grateful for all the feedback that I've been getting from everyone that's got in touch either in comments or have messaged me outside of the videos saying that they found them useful. And while other people are doing that, I'm going to keep making them because hopefully it's all about making a positive difference to you and your financial decisions. I didn't actually plan to do a follow-up from yesterday's video, and I spoke at quite a great deal of length actually about crypto stocks and all the other good stuff, but there was a few people that got in touch, and it was more about them asking questions, if I'm honest with you, based on the video they'd come across it. I'm not sure whether that was something that they saw live or whether they watched it later. Equally, they seem to have watched the video and then followed it on with reading some of the other articles and posts, and that's great, and it's exactly why I put them out there, so that people can access it. But they got in touch with a couple of questions, and it just really helped for me paint the picture about why it's so important to make sure that you have all that good information and you can make better decisions with respect to your own personal finances, particularly in that stocks and crypto space. So just before I get going into that then, clearly I'm live and I'm out and about in the public again. I say the public, I live in the north of Scotland. It's relatively quiet here compared to what you might encounter in the major towns and cities elsewhere. You might be able to hear a bit of a road noise. There's a major road about 25 yards away from me, and I am on a public footpath, but actually it's really quite secluded and you'd have to really come out of your way to find me here. So hopefully that doesn't interrupt you too much and you get a nice bit of a natural view as well. But anyway, made the video yesterday, and I think it was yesterday evening, somebody got in touch with me. It was a young lady, early mid-20s. Situation was she's living with her boyfriend, similar age. It doesn't really matter, I guess, for the purpose of this, but had seen the videos, gone on and, like I said, read the articles, and there were some things that had really resonated with her in the context of what they might want to do with their money so that they can get to where they want to be with respect to the next stage in their life. And I'm going to unpack some of this stuff through the guise of their story, because clearly after a lot of back and forth, it really started to paint a picture for me about why some of this is so important. Excuse me, let's take a drink. So, to paint the picture for you then, young couple, like I say, early mid-20s roughly, renting a place together. Is it a flat? Is it a house? I don't know. It doesn't really matter, I guess, for the purpose of this. And they were thinking about, well, what to do with respect to saving to buy a property of their own, start a family if they wanted to do that in the future, and all the other kind of stuff that we just take as normal. And they were speaking to them, really thoroughly decent people, to be completely honest with you, just normal folk in the street that go out and do ordinary work. For context, trying not to go into too many specifics here clearly, but combined household income of somewhere between 40 and 50,000. So not the greatest amount, to be honest with you, and that's not to be disrespectful to them and what they're doing, because like I say, thoroughly decent people just trying to go to work and get ahead. But that's really important for broader context when it comes to thinking about what we're doing with our money. So this is where it all started really. Not really got much financial knowledge, but they've been online, and maybe it's just because of their age that's where they go. Again, not for me to pick at or criticise with respect to whether they go here, there or whatever. But they picked up a lot of stuff online about how to save, invest, all the other kind of stuff. And it's one of those where you can see, where you're hearing the explanation, you can see it unravelling in front of your eyes, and the problems just diagnose themselves, right? And these, unfortunately, and like I say, not stupid people, genuine people that had just been given some really bad ideas by folk online, went down this notion that we should first of all rent the property and invest the difference so that we can build a pot of money up to do whatever they want to do with it. Now, in their mind, it was all about buying a property. So of course, the first part for anyone that's followed some of my work before, what is this difference? And that was something that I had to perhaps unpack with them slightly slower time, but to put it to you in the way I did to them, if I was in their landlord's shoes, do I have a mortgage? Yeah, probably. Do I have other costs associated with renting that property out? Insurance, whatever. Yeah, probably. Am I family, a close friend, or a charity? No. So therefore I am probably not going to rent it to them at a substantial discount, if at all. Excuse me. They're at least going to cover costs, right? Which is exactly what the case was in here. So the first mistake was we couldn't quite make the math as it were, in the sense that trying to understand what this supposed difference was to then invest that money. And you and I, and I'm sure people watching this will know that when people are investing money, it's typically done for a much longer time horizon, unless you're a sophisticated trader or you really know what you're doing, where you can make money much quicker on the stock market. The average person is putting it in for a lot longer time frame, and that was the first mistake. Well, the first mistake was that we couldn't really figure out what this difference was because it didn't exist. Secondly, we were just putting something into the stock market in the hope that it was going to produce some kind of return for us at some point in the future. And inevitably, with the kind of money that they were putting in there, they were never going to be able to buy a property with it. And when they kind of started to unpack all that, it became quite apparent that they weren't perhaps on the most solid financial ground that they thought they could have been. Now, this video is about crypto to an extent, and I will come to that in a moment, but before I talk about crypto, because that was kind of part two of the conversation, you really need to understand the broader circumstance of this, like I say, really nice couple that were just trying to get ahead and get along in life, but again, really bad access to information and just made some really critical mistakes. So my take when talking to them and going through it all was that actually, like I said, not in the best of positions compared to what they thought they were going to be. For those that don't know, when you come to buy a property, and this is a very general rule, so please don't jump on and shoot me down if I don't quite hit the exact numbers here, but the banks will broadly lend to you at approximately a maximum end of 4 times salary. So in theory, if I earn a combined household income of £50,000 a year and both of us are going on the mortgage, then roughly the top end mortgage I will get is £200,000. Clearly, if I've got things like debts, credit cards, doesn't really matter, any kind of rolling consumer debt, that number is going to track downwards. This couple's case, there was a little bit, but it wasn't. Obviously, everyone's got a different position on debt, right? But this debt was not lethal to their mortgage hopes and dreams. That was by far not the biggest problem. And then eventually you arrive at a figure. For the sake of argument, let's say that figure is now £175,000 because we've subtracted debt costs and so on. The total amount that you can lend, plus the deposit that you bring to the purchase of the property, denotes the maximum amount that you can borrow, or the maximum property price that you can buy at and still get a mortgage to make it all add up to whatever the property value is. So in respect to this particular couple, we got income. I've already alluded to the fact, and this is again completely non-judgmental, it was not the highest, but people have bought houses on less. Not really interested about whether they earned $40,000 a year or $400,000 a year. Doesn't matter. But in their case, it did a little bit. I think I'm saying it doesn't matter in the sense that I'm not there to judge that. So we got this income thing, and that meant that we were quite restricted in terms of what property we could buy, because the top end number was never going to be great, which means if you're going to buy anything, and again, it depends on where you live, these guys live further south where property is more expensive, you're going to have to come in with a much, much bigger deposit so that you can make a meaningful purchase. So when we started unpacking these guys' finances, we were kind of sticking it all in the stocks and hoping that was all going to be fine and it was going to come good for us. Not really invested in things that were likely to generate those kind of returns, first of all, or certainly not those kind of returns within the time frame that this young couple were talking about. Not really anything in terms of cash allocation, so really difficult for them to put their hands on liquid assets without having to draw down the investments that they already had. And a relatively low income, and they hadn't been able to get a sensible conversation with someone to help them understand how the maths stacked in such a way that they could buy the property. Now, for them, that this created a challenge by their own recognition, because I think they understood the problem but couldn't quite diagnose the problem, and I guess in the medical sense write the prescription for what the solution was. They kind of fumbled along for a number of months, I would imagine, however long they've gone along for, doing their best, putting a bit of money here, putting a bit of money there, recognising that despite their best efforts they're not generating the returns that they want. What do they turn to? Turn to the cryptocurrency market. And I really felt for them, because again, anyone that understands how the cryptocurrency market works, it's so volatile. We spoke yesterday about sentiment, liquidity and all the other stuff, and I don't want to dig that back up, because that's not really what's relevant here. The point that I was making is that this was a young couple who, just through lack of knowledge, and again, they weren't stupid people, but no one sits down and really teaches you this stuff in a way that you need to be able to grasp to really get on and get ahead in life. Couldn't really figure out what this mystical difference was, because it didn't exist, which meant that by the time you factored in their household income, two people in a similar wage, pretty much one of them covered rent, gas, electric, council tax, and a few other bills and bits and pieces, and that broadly meant that they had one of the other partner, their income pretty much to live on for the entirety of the month, and hopefully we'll chuck a little bit of money in stocks and hope that nothing else goes wrong, because they're just, and again, the greatest respect to this couple, there's not enough money coming in to really start to move it around and do a lot of stuff with, and they just could not figure out how to get out of this mess. So in their mind, because of what they'd seen online, everyone wins, we've all heard the stories, you go to the cryptocurrency market. Then I'll come back to that. Excuse me. So having recognised that stocks wasn't really working for them, we decided to turn our hand to crypto instead. And again, perhaps a bit of naivety, but certainly not stupidity, they put in far too much money, didn't really understand what they were buying, and are now sat on considerable losses, wondering whether they should be essentially doing the equivalent of throwing good money after bad at a token or tokens with no real knowledge about whether that token will or will not move in the direction that they need it to, and if it does, under what kind of time frame, with what kind of returns. And a real double-edged sword for me when I'm talking to these people, because for me it's conversations like what I had yesterday that really validate why I started doing some of the things that I did in the personal finance, investing and economic space. But it's also some of the hardest conversations that you have to have, in the sense that the sum total of that conversation for this poor couple was that, look, we need a new plan. We need to stop throwing good money after bad at all these other projects that you'd seen online, because they didn't say, nor would I name any accounts that they'd been watching, because that's not really fair either. But had some really poor advice or guidance or whatever it is, because clearly it's never financial advice when you go online and people tell you to buy stuff. Throwing good money after bad, not really understanding the financial context by which they were operating in, leading to some really, really poor decisions with no real genuine prospect about how they would improve those circumstances in anything that resembled the kind of time frame that they were working on. And so the message from me was ultimately, look, firstly, we've got to stop throwing good money after bad at these projects. We've got to get a real plan with some sensible timelines. And by the way, without a significant increase in your income, the timeline that you're giving me, and they were looking at only a few years, is just not realistic. And that's not me saying that I want to be awful to them, because I absolutely don't. They were so pleasant. It was unbelievable. But there's not really all that much coming in the grand scheme of things. Roughly 50% of your income is going on living costs. The other 50% of income that's left over isn't really all that high, and you've still got to cover shopping, transport, and anything else that you've got to do, and put some money away, because whether we like it or not, and it happened to me only a few weeks ago, cars fail MOTs, fridge freezers pack up, all that stuff is still going to happen, irrespective of whether you're sat on a loss in the crypto market or not. So this was one of those very few occasions where I was actually saying to somebody, I don't think you're in the right time, you're in the right space to be doing that investment right now. Actually, what we need to do is pay off some of these debts first of all, but we need to look at some of the products that are really going to help you get a foot up on the property ladder, but only after we have built up some kind of cash pot that we can go to when things go wrong for reasons like I've just said. Excuse me. Oh, pardon me. And the one thing that I spoke about to them was actually the lifetime ISA. Now, there are some people who, we follow each other, we comment on each other's work. They cover this stuff far better than I do. It's not really my niche, but it's just where the conversation went yesterday. A fantastic product that these people are eligible to buy. Again, forgive me if I misquote the maths here now, but you can put in £4,000 a year in a cash lifetime ISA, and the government will give you a 25% return on your annual contributions. Now, in the context of this particular couple, they can have one lifetime ISA each. So theoretically, if they could afford it, they could put in £4,000 each and get between them £2,000 at the end of each tax year as a government top up on top of the interest that's already accumulating. And therefore, with respect to buying a property and getting the kind of deposit that they needed, although £8,000 in total probably isn't a realistic ask of them, it gives them a platform and a mechanism to effectively save and forecast a timeline to where they can actually have a deposit together that is meaningful for the property that they wanted to buy, or the kind of property they wanted to buy, in a way that you just cannot do that with respect to the stock market or the crypto market. Now, if this was something that they were looking to do in 10, 20 years time or more, then I could kind of see the logic in that, in the sense that if they could commit to a fixed amount of money, run the maths on a compounding calculator, you can see the kind of lump sums that they're expecting to have at the end of year 5, 10, 20, and maybe they could put that towards a deposit. But this was just a real prime example of some really nice people that had tried to do the right thing by going online, doing some research and setting themselves up for success, but have come across some really poor information in so many ways with respect to what crypto assets they should be buying, because apparently everyone's doing that. If you're under 40, let's essentially do the equivalent of go to the casino, stick it all on a random token that we've never heard of, and wait for our multi-millions of pounds to turn up in our wallets when we log in randomly one Monday night. Clearly doesn't happen, or it very, very seldomly happens. The whole thing about investing and when and why you should be investing, again, that was just not given to them in a way that was coherent, and they'd not given themselves any kind of breathing space to cover any kind of financial emergency, or even to allow them to forecast a proper timeline by which point they would have the capital that they needed to get into the property market. Excuse me. So lots of different factors all coming together there, and I hope, if you saw yesterday's video and you're familiar with some of the other work that I'm putting out there at the moment, this is one of those stories where thankfully they left the call seemingly at least feeling a little bit relieved that they'd been able to have a sensible conversation with somebody that was able to sit down. And again, I'm not a financial advisor. I don't give financial advice. This was just very much this is how it works conversation, and based off what you've told me, guys, these are the options that I feel like you might want to explore some more. But they certainly felt, although disappointed, that they had perhaps been misled as far as they were concerned, a little bit relieved that actually we understood the circumstances that we were operating in much, much better than we previously did, and the future, and it was clearly something that was really important to them. They've been living together for a number of months, want to buy a house, start a family, like I say, only a young couple, and they've got all this stuff to look forward to, but it becomes really, really challenging if you can't make the money add up. And at least, although they did get a little bit of bad news that, hey, I think we need to look at either finding a way to increase your income through second jobs or whatever, or expanding your timeline, they now felt at least that they were on the right path. Not the kind of updates that I typically give, and like I said, I didn't plan to do one of these, but it just felt really, really important that I used what I'd heard yesterday as a means of explaining how some of this stuff operates in the real world in a way that perhaps sometimes only a practical example can. We can write the articles, we can make the posts, but it's only when you start to interact with real people do you actually feel the importance of this really hit home, and it's really reinforced to me the importance of continuing to do some of this stuff. Every person that you help is potentially a life changed, right? And that's so powerful. And on that then, while we're online, just a couple of generic updates that I haven't really been talking about all that much, and we're not quite in a position to publish it yet, but I've been doing a lot of collaboration and conversations, really meaningful conversations actually, with a number of businesses, charities and local authorities about expanding some of the coaching work and access to the book for those people that perhaps need it. And we are not quite at the point of having something finalised yet, but there's a number of meetings taken place already. There's a number scheduled to take place throughout May, so please keep an eye on the X page. I'll look to post those updates as soon as I'm able to, with hopefully some really good ideas that are going to come out for ways that we can collaborate and hopefully to a different audience bring the means to change their lives in a really, really positive way. And that's what all this is about. Thanks very much for bearing with me again through the inclement Scottish weather. I don't know if you can tell, but it's been quite hit and miss here this evening. I had to delay going live for about 10-15 minutes because a massive rainstorm came out of nowhere, but thankfully it stayed dry on us while we've been doing the conversation tonight. I'm really keen to hear your thoughts on what we've discussed today, particularly if you disagree with me actually in anything that I said with respect to the conversation with this couple. Love the interaction. Please keep it up. On a bit of a campaign this week to increase the following. So for those of you that aren't aware, I've had a number of issues with the X algorithm over the last few weeks. I've only really been in the X content making game, as it were, for a couple of months at that, and we've really had a love-hate relationship with the X algorithm, and that's led to periods of me doing long periods of time talking to myself, hoping that somebody picks it up, and we're finally starting to get out the back end of that. But so what of that is, we've lost a lot of followers, we've started to gain them again, but we've been hovering around a similar number for a while, and the target this week is to get to 700 by the end of the week. We're currently sitting at around 730, and for me this is so important. This is genuinely life-changing stuff for people, and I don't profess to be the only voice out there delivering financial education and economics type content, but this is clearly here to help people. You don't have to just rely on me. By all means, listen, read it, and choose not to follow it. That's entirely up to you. But this is all about giving people another an alternative avenue, an alternative voice, and perhaps hopefully connecting the dots with respect to finance, economics, and your money wellness in ways that you perhaps don't do elsewhere. Thanks again for sticking in and watching this. Look forward to hearing from you all soon. Take care and have a good rest of your evening.